So Jeeva leads the global sales strategy and execution for cloud scale analytics business at Microsoft. He is responsible for accelerating the growth of the Azure cloud scale analytics portfolio, and he is a thought leader in data analytics and AI. So welcome, Jeeva. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. This is my second time doing this summit, and it's absolute pleasure to be here with all of you, and on time as well. And there is a cryptic message to it, because until 2 minutes ago, I didn't show up here. So you can imagine the organizers. They had their heart in their mouth, and me as well. So now we put it back, all good. How are we all doing this morning? All right, you're saying this is the third time you are saying, so let's all come up one more time. You need to stay with me for 30 minutes. How are we all doing this morning? All right, thank you. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is, we have about 30 minutes, right? So I have been in this industry for quite some time. And until about AI came about, 1.5 years ago, all of us were actually talking about one important thing, which is about how do we prepare data for, your insights is going to be as good as your data, right? That was the thing that we have been saying for nearly 20 years. And we were all focused on data quality and all that. It's not a new thing. And then AI came along. The one thing that changed is about, is your data ready for AI? Right? Before it was, is your data ready for analytics? Now it is AI, is your data ready for AI? I think we have been stuck with this problem for more than 20 years. We are still trying to find out how we can actually effectively address this data problem before we actually continue to experiment with this whole AI thing, right? So in the next 25 minutes, what I'm actually going to do is to trigger our thought process around how we can actually effectively approach this problem so that we can solve it for once for all, right? It's about, today, if you look at how we are approaching the AI, there is an AI platform, there is an analytical platform, there is a BI platform, there is a data governance platform. So we have a mass proliferation. Is that the most effective way to go about it? So what I'm going to do is to trigger your thought process around how we can actually solve this problem, okay? So that's the topic around data foundation for AI. So we know there is a tremendous amount of excitement, both behind Microsoft, and you all know that it is because of AI factor, and this is an annual report. In the quarterly reports, we publish all this data, that nearly 22,000 customers have actually come to Microsoft, and they are all trying out AI. And excitement is off the charts, right? Absolutely everyone in this room understands the real value proposition that you can get when you apply AI for right use cases, right? But if you think about it, the value proposition is very clear, right? So for at least in the first 14 months, in the customers who have tried it out, it's becoming very clear that for every dollar that customer invests, it's about 4 times the return, and the time it takes to get value from your investment is around 14 months. But when it comes to how we are going to go about it, if we address the data problems, definitely the ROI is going to be much higher, and the time it takes to get the ROI is going to be a lot shorter as well, right? And from Microsoft side, I have been with Microsoft quite a long time. And one thing that anybody who have observed Microsoft, starting with Windows until the time, we have been messing around with Internet Explorer, Edge, and all that stuff. And then there was a Bing search too, which was a joke for a long period of time, right? But in the last 1.5 years, if you observe Microsoft, that is the amount of innovation, the pace in which things are happening at Microsoft, we have never ever seen the pace like what we are observing before. And every single application that we give to you all have that AI component already built into it, right? So even from Teams, I know many of us use Teams today. The summarization features and everything else, there is absolutely no product within Microsoft that is not leveraging AI today, right? So we just want to tell you how we are actually embracing AI. But from customer perspective, if you look at how the AI is being actually leveraged, predominantly it's around these 4 use cases, right? So you have the content search, the semantic search for sure, You can search for all the content, the code, and also the content generation. Many of us use that. And then, of course, it is also for the summarization, which we love, okay? But if you look at all the customers who have actually tested out all these use cases, there are two initial feedback that has actually come in for us. And that is, one, everybody is saying that, hey, Jeeva, PTU is expensive, AI is expensive. And then the second problem that we hear from customers is that, well, the use cases are not really giving the best value that we actually expected. It's not showing the ROI, right? It's not that the AI is expensive. It is not that the use cases are actually not producing the value. But if you think about how the AI is being leveraged today, it is super clear that all of us are trying to apply the AI use cases on this model, which is actually on the existing data infrastructure that you have. And the existing infrastructure that we have today is something that we have inherited over a period of last 30 years, right? Whenever we came, we started with the database world in 1970s, and whenever the new thing, data systems came along to solve a very specific problem, we just kept attaching to it with an extensive system integration work. And we all made it work, because most of the time what we did with our data estate was all focused on operational reporting. Yesterday, last week, last quarter, and last year. But the future of analytics, and this is something that we have been telling to customers that in our own telemetry, Microsoft, that in less than 2 years, more than 50% of your enterprise analytical environment is going to support real-time applications and AI/ML applications consuming data directly from the data platform. So it's clear that what got us here will not get us to move forward with the future needs of the organization, right? So fundamentally, we need to think about how do we transform the data estate. So when we are trying to apply the data estate, AI use cases, this is the diverse data estate. Just about 10 years ago, when we all had that, we all lived in a beautiful world. Like we had one on-prem, and then that became multiple on-prem. Then it became multiple geographies for global organizations. Then we have multi-cloud environment today as well. So when you think about applying a model, or whether you are training or refining a model, which data set you are going to use it on? Within Microsoft, before we actually went through a whole data estate modernization journey, we understood that we had about 800 copies of the same data sets that we were floating around. So 800 copies of the same data set floating around within the organization. That's Microsoft. So imagine you are not immune from that too. So when you're training a model, what is the lineage? Where are you going to data? How are you going to train all the model? Whose data is actually the most valid data to train it? Right? So that's the fundamental problem that we are trying to solve. So when you're thinking about applying AI, think about a strong data foundation, right? And where it can actually brings all the important things that you need. So all the personas and all the AI and BI and analytics, everything into a single data platform, which all uses the same data foundation, then that's a massive win for all of us, right? So the needs are very clear. Are we all good so far with the data foundation theory? Pulse check. Did I let you all sleep? All right, okay. So let's keep moving, okay? So now in the interest of time, what we're going to do is just focus on the important data foundation side, right? So we clearly know why the organization struggled. And I will be preaching to the choirs if I actually go through the slide in detail. So the idea is very simple, right? You have massive amount of data sources, everything is producing data, and then you have data at rest that is sitting in multiple different data places, and typically this is how the entire organization works. And typically, most of the time, you see a central IT organization doing all of these things, coordination work between multiple organizations, trying to do enable the organizations. So every time when we have talked about how do we go about solving this problem, we wanted the feedback from customers, right? So in all the feedback that we got, 3 things became very clear. So when we wanted to help you with the data estate modernization, we wanted to go about addressing 3 critical problems, and this is the feedback that we got. One, every single one of the customer wants to take this as an opportunity to simplify their data infrastructure, right? The heart of this data estate simplification lies in the ambition to remove the data latency. Why? We already talked about it. We are moving away from operational reporting model to more AI/ML applications consuming data in real time. So unless we remove the data latency, we are not going to be able to support those type of use cases. That's number one. Number two, this is a perennial problem that we have had all this while, right? We all have, almost every single conversation for me with my customers starts with this, Jeeva, we are a data-rich, information-poor organization. Who doesn't have that problem here, right? And if we have that problem today, think about the future in about less than few years' time when you bring in massive amount of data into your infrastructure, right? Through telemetry data, user data, the clickstream data, everything that you want to capture from the users, employees, and the customers or the products. So everything at the heart of it is that how do I improve the efficacy in the way the data is being served and leveraged across the organization? That is the second fundamental theory that we wanted to address. The third is, of course, this is the bread and butter. What used to be a great data governance, remember the time we used to have a data retention policy, right? And then now we are using it as data as actually as important as blood to the organization. So think about for a moment on the data governance, what used to be one on-prem, we have multiple on-prem, multiple cloud. So when you think about data governance and federating it, how do you get singular view of all the data that exists across all of your organization? Unless you actually know which data asset that you have, then you can't even classify it. If you don't classify it, you can't apply policies. And if you don't apply policies, of course, you're not going to have any trace to the data, right? So 3 fundamental problems that we wanted to address by going about this data foundation. Summarizing it, infrastructure simplification, improving the operational efficacy in the data is being leveraged and served across the organization. Third is about federating the data governance. Am I resonating well with you so far? Come on, I need energy. All right, okay. So when we go about modernizing the data foundation, my objective is to help you to address these 3 critical issues, okay? So number one, as I mentioned to you in the beginning itself, that today we have multiple different systems, right? AI is running independently, analytics is independent, and everything is running siloed. How about our independent? If you think about all the use cases that are being tested today in AI, whether you are actually applying a model, so your data foundation should be a singular data foundation for addressing all the analytical needs, right? So if you think about it, whether you are actually doing a custom tuning for the model or whether you are leveraging a pre-built capability or applying a model, it should be on the same data and the same single copy of the data and the same data foundation. And many of our customers use AI Studio today to do all of these things, right? Right now, the concept of model as a service is actually emerging as well. But here is the problem. This is what I told you in the beginning itself, that you are trying to apply AI for the industry standard use cases, right? Where we are expecting the customers will go in order to get the best value for their investment is only when they leverage AI for automation, for operationalizing the insights that they get from their own analytical environment, right? So imagine the virtuous cycle that we have. How about you actually operationalize your use cases? Every single internal organizations that you support come up with an insight for the business needs that they have, and then you try to develop a model or pick a model and try to operationalize that for the business users. I think that's where, and then in that way you can quantify the use ROI and value of the use cases and everything else. And if you want to build that virtuous cycle, then again, like I said, our data foundation should be able to support both analytics and AI all in a single platform, bringing together all the personas. AI personas should not be working somewhere else. Analytics should not be working somewhere else because essentially they should be working on the same data copy, right? So when we come up with a data foundation with an aim of simplifying the whole infrastructure, one theory is super simple, that everything that your data personas need, from data integration all the way to, from taking the data from the lake all the way to the business users through insights, every single thing that they need should be available in a single platform, right? You shouldn't be going into 5 different players, 8 different companies, platforms, which is stitched together with system integration work to do that work, right? So the second thing, if you think about it, is that empowering the business organizations. This is where the massive complexity exists. In almost 150 CIO engagements that we have had in the recent times, one thing that becomes very clear is about how do you empower your organizations. And this is where the friction exists between the central IT environment and also the individual business groups, because the business groups think that the IT is not actually acting too fast for them, fast enough for them, and then they go and create their own shadow IT environment too, right? So when you are thinking about enabling your organization, remember the goal. You have to get insights coming from your business users before even you try to deploy leverage AI for operationalizing these use cases. So the fundamental theory is that you need to be able to, your entire AI use cases should be driven by the business users, and unless you empower them with all the things that you need, we will not be able to get there. So now we laid out the clear path about how we are going to leverage the data foundation theory, right? We wanted to integrate AI, analytics, BI, personas, everybody in a single platform. So how about going about it? In our world, the data foundation looks like in four different layers, right? The fundamental to that is the data governance. So as I mentioned to you, about 5 years ago, we have gone through our own share of journey in this whole process. I'm about 15 minutes. So we have undergone our own transformation, right? So about 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, Microsoft actually went with everything centralized on a data warehouse platform. The problem with that approach was that it gave immense amount of control for Microsoft, but innovation perspective, we were not going anywhere. And then we swung the pendulum the other side. We experimented the federating all the data innovation across the businesses. We let the businesses do whatever they want. Innovation was happening at a massive pace, amazing, but the cost of doing analytics became cost prohibitive, right? And that also led to 2 big problems that I'm pretty confident that will resonate very well with you too, which is about both data proliferation, which is what I told you about 800 copies of the same data sets floating around, and then the infrastructure proliferation too. And then governing all of those data became a massive problem too. Maintaining a lineage across how the data gets transformed, morphed on, all these things became a challenge. So today we have actually, about 4 years ago, we embraced a model, which is the architecture that I'm actually talking to you about. So this architecture has been already talked. We have been socializing this with our majority of the customers, and at least so far, there is 130 to 140 implementations that are supporting multiple different customers leveraging this architecture. So this is not like a conceptual theory. I just want you to walk away with the thought that this architecture is something that we have socialized, it's working, and it is actually providing value to the customers, okay? So when we talk about data governance, the number one thing is about, as I said, how do you get a singular view of all the data? Today, when we look at all the data governance platforms, it is actually focused on very siloed environments. Either it could be focused on geography, or it could be based on a data infrastructure, or it could be based on one particular cloud platform. But unless you have a holistic view, you are not going to be, like I said, classify all the data and apply all those policies with respect to it. Unless you apply those policies, then you won't be able to serve the data to the business users. So from that standpoint, Microsoft has been trying to solve this problem, if not at the adequate level of maturity, but Purview is actually fastly catching up to help you with that initial set of singular view of all the data assets and everything else. So no matter whether you have data in your multiple on-prem or multiple cloud environment, you should have the same thing. The second most critical problem is on the data foundation side. Remember what I said, when you are actually trying to apply an AI, are you going to apply the model on the data that is sitting in one infrastructure or another infrastructure, or which type of data, or which copy of the same data that you are going to train the model on? We're going to solve that problem. We told you that it is much more easier to go and solve the problem related to AI using one copy of the data with one lake. So Microsoft has done something that is totally new to the industry that no one else has done before. About 6 months ago, during Ignite, we actually released the idea of Fabric as a data platform for all the AI initiatives. I'm not going to talk about the product, but I'm going to talk about one of the most critical part of the the Fabric. So the most important thing is about one lake. We all know the promise of Hadoop, right? When it came about in 2010, 12, the idea behind the Hadoop was that you can actually, it acts as a simple, cheap storage for all of your data, so you can put both your structured and unstructured data. But it never panned out because the idea of single copy of the data in one place never worked out because it became a data swamp. But then the regulatory requirements prevented us from using one data lake because every geography wanted to have their own lake environment. And maintaining all of this became a massive challenge, and we know the history right now. So when we went about solving this problem of helping you with one copy for training all your data, we wanted to solve that problem. So we all know the storage part of it, so I don't want to talk about the storage, but we wanted to go one level above. So how do we go and provide the data virtualization layer so that if you can't have all data in one lake environment, at least you will have access to all the data that you have in your different parts of the world, different parts of the data structure too, right? Is that a fair statement? If we get there, that's a massive value proposition, right? So that is at the data at rest. How about actually bringing data that is coming into your infrastructure today which are supporting all the digital applications? I know you are collecting all the data through data stores, like MongoDB, Cosmos DB, and all the Cassandra and all that stuff. How do you bring all those data in almost near real time so that when you train the model, it is actually using the data that is actually produced at the edge environment too, right? So we wanted to go about solving the problem. So I'm going to play a little bit of demo for 2 minutes, and then I will come back on this one, okay?
We've seen how every workload in Fabric can work with the same one copy of data when it is in one lake. But we don't always want to copy data or build and maintain complex ETL processes, especially if we have existing investments we want to leverage. Contoso Outdoors is a classic example of this. If we look at where Contoso Outdoors is storing and managing their data, you can see that they, like a lot of organizations, have data everywhere. In Snowflake, there's the customer loyalty program. Azure Databricks has the sales data. Dataverse has the customer support systems. Cosmos DB has the retail order tracking. And we can get our product inventory and our product catalog from Amazon S3 buckets. With Fabric, we're going to create a new lakehouse where we can access all of these sources in a single unified location that is always in sync to the underlying systems with zero ETL. Let's start with our data in Azure Databricks. We can create a shortcut directly to the data since Fabric natively works with the data in Delta Parquet format. I just provide the connection information, and just like that, I can now access the data through one lake in Fabric with zero data movement. I can do the same thing with Dataverse and Amazon S3, and if I jump ahead, you can see the data from each of the sources here. And you can see we've created shortcuts to more than just tables of data. We also created shortcuts to the images from our product catalog and to text documentation files for our products. We can also use these for building solutions in Fabric or for other services like Azure AI Studio, so they can access the data through OneLake. Next, we're going to bring in our data from Snowflake and Cosmos DB. For these sources, we're going to use Fabric's new database mirroring capability. Database mirroring automatically reflects data from Snowflake directly into OneLake and keeps it in sync with every change. This means my customer loyalty program from Snowflake can be accessed seamlessly in Fabric with zero ETL, and it's always kept in sync automatically by Fabric. Once the mirroring is set up and running, my data is ready to be used across every workload in Fabric. I've also set up mirroring to Cosmos DB, and just like my Snowflake data, it's being reflected into Fabric and kept in sync and ready for me to use. Let's go back to our lakehouse. Now I have the data from all 5 different clouds integrated in minutes into a single unified lakehouse in Fabric. With one click, I can switch to the SQL endpoint in Fabric, and I can write a single SQL query that joins data from each of the 5 different clouds, showing how I can work with all of this data in a unified way. If we switch over to the lineage view, you can see this even more clearly. We have a full view of downstream and upstream lineage, and we can see the Snowflake, Azure Databricks, Dataverse, Amazon S3, and Cosmos DB data all coming together and ready for my organization to use. For example, here we've created a machine learning model to predict demand and inventory levels for the upcoming holiday season. We also have Power BI for reporting on the data. Let's open up this report that shows order status for our loyalty program members. This report is using Power BI's direct lake mode, so all the data is always up to date, and I can slice and dice the data with blazing fast performance. Since the data is all coming from one copy in one lake, it also means we can deploy one security model for the data that flows through all these solutions. We can see the sensitivity label flowing through to every downstream artifact, along with any data level security we apply. And finally, if I switch over to the Purview Hub in Fabric, I can see a complete view of all of our data assets. This helps me understand data sensitivity, endorsement, and usage of all my Fabric items. As you've seen, Microsoft Fabric is a game changer for enabling organizations to create a unified data estate spanning all of their data and supporting every analytics workload in one easy-to-use experience.
How do you find this? Can we just raise our hand? Do you think this will be useful to leverage the shortcut, the mirroring, all these capability that comes in the ADLS with the one lake to bring together the single view of singular access to all the data that sits across multiple places? All right. So just a guess, okay? Do you know how long it will take for you to set this up? Can anyone say? I'll tell you this. You can actually go and try it out today. You can set this up and configure all the things that you just saw in the demo in less than 5 minutes' time. That's how long it will take for you to set the whole data estate signed up. And more importantly, you get a free usage for all these things for 2 months, so you don't have to worry about consuming at cost. So I would highly recommend you to try out, because our number one objective to train all the AI model is to have the idea that you need to do it on one single copy of the data, right? I'm rushing for time, and I'm actually going to finish it off in a couple of minutes. One is on the data at the rest. How about the data that is actually coming to your infrastructure through SAP and all the ERP applications? And one thing that we have noticed is that we all use SAP. And SAP data is the nerve center for every organization, and every internal organization wants to have access to the data almost real time. The competing need to have access to all of the SAP data all at the same time ends up in all of these different businesses creating their own ingestion infrastructure, their own data cleansing, standard tool, leveraging different tools and all that stuff. So when you talk about data foundation, the data foundation, data layer, we need to factor in about how do we provision all of these resources to your businesses so they don't go and create all the shadow IT environment too. So we took care of that part too, right? So then remember the second goal that we talked about, which is about enabling your internal organizations. The insights have to come from the internal organizations before you think about applying AI for those insights, right? So from that perspective, how do you actually provision all the domain zones that you need? How do you provision all the workspaces with all the data onboarding without compromising the enterprise security and enterprise governance requirements and all that? So how about we do all of these things with a click of few buttons so that you can support all of your organizational needs from both to data, the tools for all the different personas, all in a single workspace, right? So when we talk about the consumption layer, this is the final objective that we had, which is about bringing together all the things, which is about your analytics, AI, BI should be all in one platform. And everything that your data personas need, or any personas within your organization who touches the data, should be working on the same platform, right? So when you provision all those workspaces and domain zones, it shouldn't be for one particular workspace for one person, another one for another personality, right? Persona, I'm sorry. So when you think about doing all these things, you are bringing together both AI and analytics and governance all in a single workspace so that you provide an effective way of engaging in scaling AI within your organization, right? So the idea is very clear. Like I set it up in the beginning itself, we wanted to address 3 critical problems when we set about creating the data foundation. And I know this is like a 30,000 feet level. There is a lot more granularity to it, which we can have a follow-up conversation. But the idea is that we wanted to provide you the infrastructure simplification by bringing all the assets in one place. So you don't have to do the system integration work. The number 2 is about within the same thing, you need to have the one copy of data. I showed you the demo about how do we go about it, right? And then we talked about how do we empower our internal organizations to increase the operational efficacy for serving and leveraging the data. I talked about how you can actually, with the click of a few buttons, you can spin up a workspace, and with all the data, the tools, and the policies governing all of those personas, everything intact, and you can actually do it with a couple of click buttons. We went through that. And then the third is about bringing together all the different personas in one single platform, which is about not having to do all these in multiple different places. I think this is where the future is going to go. In my opinion, if you can actually get to the point where you can actually bring in a strong data foundation that addresses all the capabilities that we talked about, I think that's a big game changer. We can address the most basic issues that are facing facing AI adoption today, right? So for a moment, all I want to make an argument with you right here is that this is not the most perfect solution that you can actually have it for. You go and deploy, and then it will solve the problem for all of your needs. But what we are trying to do here is that to move the maturity curve from the left to right in a big way, to get you at least more than 70% of the way. And then you can actually leverage your own ingenuity and innovation to fill the gap that fits your organizational skills, right? So that's the way that we think about going about it, and we have built a strong foundation leveraging all these different products. So I don't want to make a product pitch, but I'm going to pause it right here because I have 1 more minute. Am I resonating very well with you in terms of how we are going about it? All right. So like I said, this is the 30,000 feet level, and I rushed through a lot of stuff, a lot of conceptual stuff in less than 30 minutes time. But there is a lot more granularity to it. This architecture, like I said in the beginning itself, that it is not a conceptual one. It has been deployed in at least 120 plus 100 organizations across the world, and I would highly recommend you giving it a shot with this one as well. So there is absolutely nothing that is preventing you from trying out the one lake and all that. So with that, thank you for your attention, staying awake, and the good news is you're going to get a break. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks so much, Jeeva. Any questions for Jeeva? Yes? Let's just get a mic to you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. How easy is to build a Gen AI applications on top of the one lake? Building the RAG models, all those kind of things, with all this data sitting in different places, and it only have the connectors.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you very much for the questions. And I know I'm making an assumption here, most of the people here would have tried out Azure AI Studio and all that, right? The foundation of what we are talking about here is to run AI Studio on one lake, right? So, like I said in the beginning itself, is that the idea is if you're not able to have all copies of the same data in one place, at least you will have the other connections to other external data sets to do that. So when you are what we have been doing within Microsoft itself is that we test out all these different scenarios, and the shortcut and the mirroring capability that we bring in when we talk about, let me be very transparent and honest about it. So the mirroring capability that we have actually pushed in, it works so very well. But when you're trying to apply it for real-time AI, ML, using for decision making and all that, the performance is not up there, and this is something that we are actually trying to fix it. So the short answer is that yes, you can actually go about it. Just try it out. It's Azure AI Studio, trying to run it on for OneLake, you will see a massive difference.
All right, excellent question. I'm super aligned. Anytime I am part of a Microsoft presentation, I'm always like on the Microsoft train, ready to execute. So it was a good question, how to build a Gen AI model. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you so much, Jeeva.
All right, thank you.